Start. So very good morning to all our participants who are here in person and online. Welcome to this special talk under our only one theme, Wave 4. Today's title of today's talk is IP Strategy and Mergers and Acquisition Planning for Global Strategic Partnerships in Life Sciences. Today's talk is very special because we have not only one but two prolific speakers. Let me do a quick introduction. Madhuri Roy is a partner at Patent Counseling and Prosecution Life Sciences at Cooley LLP. Her career has an interesting mix of science and law. She represents emerging and innovative companies and the investors who are investing in them. She helps to develop and helps build patent portfolio strategies, handles patent drafting, prosecution, and strategic IP counseling. She conducts and defends IP due diligence, third-party monitoring, performs FTO and patentability analysis, and she supports pre-litigation on validity and non-infringement issues. Welcome. Our second speaker for today is Rama Padmanabhan. She is a partner, public and private mergers and acquisitions, cross-border transactions at Cooley LLP. She leads public and private mergers and acquisitions, representing buyers, sellers, and board of directors. She has cross-border life science practice, which is covering China, Southeast Asia, Europe, and UK. She has a strong focus on life sciences in biotech, pharma, medical devices, and AI, and handles structured acquisitions, including options, and acquires and deals with milestones. She is a frequent speaker on life science market trends, and she is recognized by the Mergers and Acquisitions Ratings Group as a leading US deal maker. Welcome to both our speakers for today, and I now hand over the floor to them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll go full screen. That's fine. You can come from.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. It's been great to be here today and yesterday and see this incredible campus and see everything that everyone here has achieved. And it's super exciting for me to see. As I was introduced, I've been doing life science M&A now for many years. I've been at Cooley for over 2 decades and been doing life science deals for that time. And even honestly, in the US, life science deals have changed in those 20 years. The volume of acquisitions, the nature of deals, the manner in which they're structured has changed over the last 20 years. And we now see a wide variety of deal types and complexities that can work for the smallest of companies to the companies that have, incredible valuations. And the reason why I enjoy doing life science M&A is that M&A is often the answer to a lot of questions for a life science startup. Because it's whether you're I was not sure. I'll keep speaking in the meantime. You know, uh, you know, you know, because M&A in life sciences is often used for accessing capital, right? And if you're a small company, eventually your goal is to be a company that scales up. You don't have always the ability to scale up, and so the acquirer coming in and taking your beloved product and scaling it up is often, the end game for your company. But M&A can also be used by companies to access capital in a number of ways. So, for example, I'll work often with companies that are, for example, looking to sell a certain pipeline product because they want money for another pipeline product. I also have companies, we were just talking about this earlier, that access public markets through M&A. They're acquired by a public company, they get equity in that company, and now they have the ability to access public markets through M&A. So M&A just gets utilized in a large number of ways. And what I thought I'd talk about today was, how do you as a company set yourself up for success? And I'm talking about Satel and M&A, but the same applies for partnering transactions also. And whether your strategic partner is a small pharma, medium pharma, big pharma, it doesn't matter. They're all usually looking for the same thing when they are looking to acquire you, which is a company that shows up as fairly self-aware in terms of its existing operations and its awareness of the process. So the more you can do to be prepared, the better you will showcase in connection with the deal. So I thought what I do is sort of talk through, what you can expect when someone comes in to do diligence on your company. And the first step when someone comes to talk to you about, let's just say for this discussion is partnering, right? They come in, they want to see your company, they're trying to decide whether they want to partner with you, they want to, let's say, in-license your IP. And Madhuri is going to speak more about the IP aspects of it. I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to talk about, how do you start those interactions in a way that you're going to protect your company. So first of all, just be aware, right? Your acquirer is not looking out for your best interests. They want to get as much information as they can from you. They're not looking to protect your information. Only you can protect your own information. And the way you can protect your information from the get-go is, first of all, right, you need to make sure you have a confidentiality agreement, which isn't the confidentiality agreement that they give you and they say, sign this. Because it can be the case, right? Someone shows up, pharma company, they're sophisticated, they're intimidating, they're going to give you a document. Be careful about what you're signing. Because one of the key things, right, in a confidentiality agreement is what can the information be used for? And you want to make sure that the information can be used for a very limited purpose of assessing the company for whatever transaction you're contemplating at that moment. Anything broader can result in you basically losing control of your information. Very often, buyers will come in and they'll want access to your data, for example. They'll say, this is, before I even give you a term sheet, you need to tell me, how many patients you're seeing, give me the data. I don't trust the statistics that you run. Give me the data, I'm gonna run the statistics, I'm gonna make sure that I'm happy with the efficacy, and you might be tempted to say, okay, sure, take my data, right? Well, the problem with that is you might be violating privacy obligations to your patients. So pharma, right, again, they don't care necessarily, right, that you violated your patient's privacy. What will happen is if that party walks away, the next acquirer comes in, or the next licensor comes in, and they say, oh, I hope you've satisfied all your privacy requirements with respect to your data. And if you just, gave your data to someone a year ago as part of their diligence, you might not be able to say that you satisfied your privacy obligations. So be very careful in terms of things like that, right? Make sure you're getting the right consents from patients. Make sure that you're preserving the integrity of the data. And if you don't know how to do that, talk to people to figure out how to do that. Different jurisdictions have different requirements, right, in terms of how we're going to preserve your patient's privacy. But I often see, for example, deals die because the acquirer does not feel that the target has appropriately safeguarded its patient privacy and information. Yeah.
It's a little
Jumping. I see, okay.
Probably starts
It's
here.
going back, it's going
I think
forward.
it's going, yeah.
This one, can you get it out? Bit too fast. Wait.
Right.
This is the first one. We were here. It's here, right?
Perfect, yes.
Great.
Okay.
So if you touch it, you are invincible.
Okay, you saw the whole talk, we're done now.
But my whole day has been like this with technology, so I'm pretty sure this is me and not anything with this. Like I'm slightly cursed on the technology front today. Old school, I like that. Okay, perfect, yes, that I know how to do. Okay, so now you've signed your NDA, and by the way, I should also let you know if you need documents. So the Cooley website actually has a lot of really good documents for private companies to use. It has a form of a confidentiality. So if you need to use one, just go to our website, you will find one, and that would be a good starting point. But again, just be very careful that you are customizing things and making sure that the purpose of the NDA is very clear in terms of how it's laid out. Okay, so now you have your NDA in place. What are you going to do next? You will typically, the expectation is that you're going to have some kind of a data room where you have your information. And you want to have that organized, you want to have that categorized. So again, if you go to like the full website, like we will have things like due diligence checklists. So you can get a sample checklist, for example, and you can create folders, and there are some many data rooms that are actually not that expensive now. I don't know what is used locally, but there are plenty of them, right? You can use like Dropbox and but start thinking about like how you organize your information, and also think about it, what you want to provide when. Very often you want to be strategic in terms of how you're sharing information. So think about what information you can share first so that you can assess whether there's interest in pursuing. So it might be, for example, you're probably going to put your deck in the data room, right? You're going to put your deck, you're probably going to have some aggregate data from whatever, preclinical data, whatever it is, right? But just again, be thoughtful about what you're sharing. And then as you're looking through your company, right, there's almost inevitable cleanup that a small company needs to do. That's often when you'll find, forgot to sign this contract, or, right, there's gonna be little things, for example, if you had meetings of your boards of directors, things like that, right? Just make sure that all your files are in order so that you look organized when someone comes to look at you and to have conversations with you. You will get very detailed request lists in terms of what you need to do. You don't always have to provide responses to everything that you're asked. So again, just be thoughtful about what you want to provide. Unfortunately, when you're a smaller company, you will be tested in terms of your level of comfort, and unfortunately also sometimes you do have to provide more information than you might be comfortable with to get that initial conversation going. So just know that there isn't like a right answer to the question, and so make sure you're talking with advisors, talking with others who've gone through the process to make sure you understand if what is being asked of you is pretty typical, or is there something that's going on here where it's more of a fishing expedition. They just want to know about you. They're not maybe necessarily interested in you. They just are gathering data, right? Because again, don't assume everyone is in this out of the the goodness of their heart. That isn't always the case, unfortunately. So then the other piece, right, that we think about is what will often happen in a process is there will be a period in this conversation where you will have provided documents, and the strategic party will want to have a diligence call with you. And often that will be, right, they'll give you a list of 50 questions and ask you to respond to it. Take those very seriously. This isn't something where you just show up and just answer questions. Make sure you're prepared, make sure you're thoughtful. It's almost like, even though, right, it's not like a litigation, it's almost like preparing for a litigation. You don't want to sometimes give too much information. You want to be probably in how you respond questions. Don't go off on a tangent. Try to stay on point. Because often, right, they're assessing not just the product, but a lot of weight is given, at least with startup companies, to how strong they think the founder is. And there are a lot of cues, including how you communicate, that go into that assessment. So a lot of preparation should go into preparing for these diligence sessions. And sometimes, right, it'll touch subject areas that are not familiar to you. So again, talk to people who process. And in many instances, right, you will have to talk to whoever your attorney is who's representing you, who will guide you in terms of the type of responses you can give, how much you can share. And of course, that's going to be like very important, with respect to the IPPs that Madhuri handles, but it is also true with respect, for example, critical contracts that you have. Like you might have like an in-license agreement. You've got to sometimes make decisions as to whether you're sharing information that you may not technically be allowed to share. So remember, right, the other contracts you have entered into are probably subject to confidentiality themselves. And so when you are doing a deal, you are often having to provide, under confidentiality agreement to the acquirer, an agreement that will probably say you can't share this agreement with anyone. And so there are decisions that need to be made, and often the decision in the process, particularly if you're selling to a sophisticated counterparty, is to say, look, I can't get this deal done unless I share the agreement. It's being shared under confidentiality, so I'm going to probably take a little bit of risk here and share this agreement. But these are decisions that you will have to make. It's not as simple as just, here are all my documents, I'm putting it in a room and it's now available to be seen. You've got to be thinking about these types of questions when you're sharing information. You also want to think about information about whether there are consents that might be needed under those documents in connection with the transaction. So, for example, if you have an agreement with a vendor, right? If it's a very critical vendor, you might need to think about, does it have a clause that says, when I sell my company, I have to get their consent, otherwise this critical contract will not go with the product. And the person who is interested in buying you is then going to say, it's going to be a condition of my deal that you get this contract, or you figure out an alternative vendor if this vendor doesn't work out. So think about, right, what are your contracts? Who are your suppliers? Are there any sensitivities there in connection with a transaction? Are there any personality issues there you've got to manage? Sometimes the acquirer will want to speak to the vendor in connection with the deal, particularly if it's a critical contract. So think about those topics and think about, right, when is the right time for them to speak? Sometimes having an early conversation can be a mistake, because that might become a distraction, particularly if you have a vendor who might be problematic. So I'll often say, right, don't have some of these communications until you absolutely have to have some of these communications permitted, with the acquirer. The other thing, right, is, and I'm gonna get into your territory, but IP is obviously important. Making sure that you own or have valid rights to your IP, very key. Making sure that people who worked on IP have assigned their rights. In some instances, there are presumptions based upon local law, but acquirers will often want to make sure there's a piece of paper saying all the IP is appropriately owned. And then depending on the company, right, there are a number of areas you need to be thinking about, right? Use of AI, cybersecurity, import-export control, especially if you have products that are being imported and being used, and particularly if you are looking at a transaction with a global operator. Many of them are subject to numerous regulations that they have to satisfy, that their entire organization is in compliance with these types of things. And so when they do a transaction, they're looking to see that you, even though you're small, haven't had a history that can be potentially problematic, or if you've done things that are problematic, ask you to fix it before they proceed with the acquisition. So just be aware that these are often very important to acquirers, because these are large organizations. They're going to have probably hundreds of lawyers and deal people, and each person, right, within their organization has like one job, and their job is to make sure when a deal is done, their one thing is done properly. And so, and if that person is, right, the cybersecurity person, they don't care about the rest of the deal, because if this acquisition happens and there's a cybersecurity issue, they're going to be held to task. And so, even though you might think, oh, why is this even relevant for my company? Like, this is nothing. Like, turns out that's this person's job, and they're not going to probably let you go unless you check all the boxes that they need to have checked. Okay, so and anyone, by the way, feel free to stop and ask me any questions, right, as we kind of go through this. And I know this can be a lot, so or if you feel like it's getting too in the weeds, please tell me I'm getting too in the weeds, and then I will extract myself from the weeds. So just want to be interactive. So tell me as we go through it if you feel like there's something I should focus on, or you're like, oh, you know what, this is, you talk about this. I'll go through. Trying to be sort of helpful in terms of helping people appreciate kind of what acquirers or licensors look for. But
I think we can
give me
take
the
questions
input.
later. Maybe you can start. We'll collect the questions on the chat.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So the other thing, right, that will happen in connection with a contract is the licensor will come in, acquire, and they will want to make sure that you are giving them a solid contract and you are representing things that they can rely on in order to give you the consideration for the transaction, right? And so what this will include is, they'll ask you to say all kinds of things about you. And some of them may not be true. And if it's not true, it's not bad. It's okay. You just have to tell them how your reality is different from the information they're asking for. So for example, they might say, right, you don't have any contracts that have exclusivity provisions, right? It doesn't mean that if you have one that has exclusivity provision, that it's a bad thing. It's just that you need to tell them about it because that is part of their diligence process. So just sort of know that, they're going to come in with these expectations of seeking information from you. And some of it is going to be via a conversation, some of it is going to be in the data room, and some of it is going to be actually in a contract. And to the extent that there are, I don't know if I want to call it issues, they say deviations after the fact, right? After the fact, they realize, in fact, you didn't give them the appropriate information. There can be consequences for that. And you just have to be aware that it's effectively a monetary transaction, and they are attributing value to various aspects of your company being of a certain quality. And if it turns out it is not the case, then there can be a financial consequence to you after the deal closes. And again, I think of it, I know when people hear of it, it sounds like terrifying, but I just think of it as it's all money, right? So it's like, we gave you $5 million and we saw the following thing and it had a $10,000 consequence, so give us $10,000 back. I mean, that's sort of how, that's the purpose of this exercise, is to first have them assess whether they want to acquire you, but then after the fact, to assess whether they overpaid for the asset and they feel that you owe them some money back because certain things were not exactly the way that they expected to see them. So just want to talk a little bit about different roles in connection with the deal. And you may not see all of this, but in transactions, some transactions will have a banker, a financial advisor who will come and help you. Many small companies don't have a banker. They can be expensive. They're not always particularly helpful, but they play a role. And so just be aware that some people will use a financial advisor to help them think about their company, think about what their valuation is. That may not be the case for you. In your case, it might be the acquirer comes in and says, I'll pay you X, and you might say, give me X plus Y, and then you reach a number and it's not particularly scientific. And in some cases, it's much more scientific, right? Because you have a device, you estimate the sales are, and then based on those sales, you know what the valuation of the company should be, and then you have a more strategic conversation about that. You will inevitably need a counsel, a lawyer, to represent you in connection with these deals. And likely there will be plenty of lawyers on the other side of the transaction. So this is a recap. So for when a buyer comes in and does diligence, the goal there is, right, they're trying to assess what is the appropriate valuation of this company. Are there things you need to fix before they acquire you? That's the pre-closing action. Are there things where they feel they want to acquire you, but there's a problem and they want to make sure that you're going to pay for it? So it's called like a special indemnity, right? They'll say if something happens in this category, like it looks like you're in a dispute with this vendor, and if it turns out that there's a damage because of that, you have to pay for it. So I'm going to write it into the contract. And all of that ultimately results in, right, that you get what you thought you were getting for the deal, or is the deal consideration being reduced? Just some key issues, things to watch out for, so you don't sort of have missteps. Many transactions will require some nature of regulatory approval. If you're small enough, maybe not, but there are definitely permits that require approval. For bigger deals, there will be like monopoly rules or antitrust rules. If you're a smaller company, it may not be something you need to worry about, but an instance, right, where this might become relevant is, say you're selling an asset to someone and you have a regulatory permit. You might need to get approval of the regulatory authority to transfer that permit in connection with the deal. So thinking about things like that, and thinking about, right, any other consents that you have to get, think of that in advance, and think about whether you expect to have any problems in connection with that. As we already talked about already, right? Are there any areas that are of heightened sensitivity because of the nature of your company, right? So if you're a company that's using AI, thinking about what kind of issues a company that uses AI might present in terms of compliance, in terms of, we talk about data privacy, depending on the jurisdiction that you're selling to, there might be international trade requirements. So for example, right, if you are across from a counterparty that are geopolitical issues, right? So in the US, like for example, China is a big jurisdiction, and in India also China is a big jurisdiction, right? There are all these rules that relate to how you can transact with counterparties in those jurisdictions. So that is an important factor as well. As we think about, right, your diligence process, think about things that affect the value of your company, and you know that the best for yourself, right? What are the things that impact you? It could be IP, it could be regulatory, it could be supply chain, your manufacturer, right? One of the things that I'll see often come up is companies doing great, turns out manufacturer has, the US FDA is auditing the manufacturer. The manufacturer is not being seen as compliant. You didn't do anything wrong, right? You've been operating your company perfectly. Turns out though that the acquirer doesn't like your manufacturer because of something nothing to do with you. Actually have a deal right now which has been stalled, that no one wants to acquire this company. It's been like about 6-7 months, perfectly fine company. the manufacturer is in India, and they're having an FDA compliance issue, and unless they resolve that, they can either get a new manufacturer, but that takes time, or you wait until this manufacturer resolves this issue, which also takes time, but it might be less time. And so some of these things are just completely out of your control, but can impact your deal. The other thing, right, that is important sometimes in these deals is employee retention. If the acquirer is looking to acquire a team, thinking about your team, thinking about how to keep your team motivated. I know many of you are still pretty small, but right, inevitably you grow, you have a team. How do you incentivize your team? Do you do it through equity? Do you do it so that they get bonuses in connection with the acquisition? How do you keep them invested and working towards sort of success in the deal? So I think some of these are like topics I've already covered, so I won't go into it in detail. But make sure you're avoiding these diligence speed bumps. Make sure that you're from an IP perspective, you're solid and steel. Madhuri's thunder, she'll talk about that. Make sure that your contracts, your relationships are being tracked. You are, as you enter into transactions, make sure, that you're trying your best to enter into these deals and on commercial terms, on arm's length terms. What you might enter into out of desperation today might in fact, create problems in the future. I know that puts you in a hard position sometimes, but just be aware that entering into contracts that are seen as suboptimal, might be a challenge.
Rama, can I just ask
Yes.
a question which slightly precedes this
Yeah, of
during
course.
the due diligence, which is so Kuli has been doing the largest number of these M&A deals in life sciences in the US. Do you want to comment on what are the things which sort of when you look at a case, you look at that and say, this is a great case which will have a good deal at the end of it, which are green flags, and those where things fall apart and those are red flags, right? In terms of just the opportunity to close a deal, right, with a large corporate. How does it play out in terms of what are those things which need to be clear and clean and strong for a candidate to even be considered or looked at for a M&A deal? Do you want to comment on this?
Right. So I mean, I'll say it right. I mean, for most of the life science companies, it's the data, right? So that's what will usually bring in the acquirer. Usually, it's they've heard about your company, they've seen you at a conference, a poster board, maybe you've been talking about even if it's sort of. I mean, many of our companies are early stage, like preclinical. It doesn't have to be like clinical data necessarily. But there's sort of so when pharma BD, so they have like their wish list of these are our gaps and these are our gaps that we're looking to fill, right? So that's number one, right? So that you can't control that part of it. But some of it goes in phases, right? Like it used to be like if you were like a GLP-1 company, like everyone was so excited, and now there are all these other obesity products, and so now I don't know if it's that exciting to be a GLP-1, right? So that some of that comes in fads. That part you can't control. They will generally, they'll start tracking your data. So if you've fallen into a slot where they think, you are a company that they should track, they'll start sort of tracking you in terms of your data. And then, they're probably going to look at the next thing is probably going to be IP. how solid is your ownership? What does it look like? How crowded is the field? I'd say that's probably to me like number two. And then I'd say sort of number three, right, would be do you have any liabilities that appear to be like red flags, right? So they start looking at you, you have a founder dispute, you know, you have, someone suing you for something, right? I mean, hopefully not an IP dispute, but, it could be like a vendor dispute, something along those lines. That can be definitely sort of a red flag.
How
And-
important are key opinion leaders in all of this, or your board, your advisors? I mean, the visibility that they enjoy, branding of organizations that they come from, all of
For
this.
sure, yeah, I mean,
How
if you're able to, right, become a company that's able to attract a board, that has, a reputation for, having done deals, that is always sort of helpful, because, it's seen as sort of, a check the box, oh, this person would not be spending the time on this company probably if it didn't have something special to it. So that definitely is helpful. So the stockholders, right? Like if you're able to attract investors who are seen as investors who have a track history and commitment to companies and to staying with companies, that's definitely a big factor also.
Sorry, if one more
Yeah,
question is,
please.
I just wanted to ensure that some of the things which come to the top of the mind of startups are also covered.
Yeah.
So, for example, one more very important aspect is, how do these conversations typically begin, right? M&A discussions in life sciences. Are they driven largely, is it like conferences, or is it through investment bankers, or the other ways? And what would you recommend startups and young founders do in order to reach out and create those opportunities for them?
So I mean, what I'll say, right, is that the BD people in pharma, right, they are tracking companies in each of their areas of interest. So the question is, right, like how do you become a company that they are interested in? I mean, they're definitely tracking publications. They're tracking press releases. So certainly, we will work with companies who will, right, put out a press release. Honestly, people use, right, LinkedIn, social media is also quite big in terms of talking about your product, getting people to follow you. I hate LinkedIn, but I'm sorry to say that, it actually can be pretty effective in terms of helping people connect with each other. The conferences, I think are good if you can go, but only if you can figure out a way to get in front of people. And you've got to think about the ROI of going and sort of setting up a booth. But there are big conferences at which pharma does come, right? They do come. They track their attendees. They see what space these attendees are in, and if you are strategically right before a conference or preparation, you put out some kind of press like talking about your phase 1 data, your preclinical data. That is a way of grabbing interest. I mean, not everyone, right? And I don't encourage people to just hire a banker and keep them available, because it's an expensive process and it might not come to anything. So a lot of what I will see is initially, right, founder driven, and it's always hard, right, for the first time founder. But it's not impossible, right? The second time founder was started off as a first time founder, right? So yes, I'd say, conferences can be helpful. I think a lot of people just do outreach, right? Just email, find out who's in your space, what gap do you think you can fill, and send an email with your deck, right? Not your non-confidential deck. BD people get these all the time, but make sure what you're sending them is a very high quality product, right? A very sophisticated deck. If you're using data, make sure you're quoting your sources, as opposed to, I think the market opportunity is 27 billion, no footnote indicating where you got that from, right? And sometimes, right, I think they know the market opportunity, so you don't have to feel like you have to overly sort of sell certain aspects of it. I think ultimately, right, like if you get them interested in the science, I think that often is what distinguishes you. And if you get that first outreach from them saying, "Oh, I think I find you interesting. I'll keep tracking you." Make sure you're staying in touch with people, and make sure that they're updated. I mean, the other area, right, is investors. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to get like a sophisticated investor, that goes an extremely long way.
Yeah, I thought so because I think the number of deals, I mean when you look at it, there are the deal makers. If you look at it, the people who invested in the previous rounds, or the lawyers, or deal, or whoever were the people involved in the deal. I presume they also bring those linkages.
Yeah, they do, right? And I mean, what you'll see, right, which can often be very discouraging when you're starting out, is you'll start seeing the same names, right? You'll see the same funds, and you might think, well, but my science is so much better than theirs, right? So I appreciate that can be frustrating, but we constantly see companies with founders like yourself who are able to ultimately, right? Ultimately, the data speaks for itself. After a point, the question is, right, getting the money to get the data. I know, simpler, easier said than done.
Yeah. Great. So I think thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
And,
happy to answer.
are you done with the slides?
I'm done with my slides. I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know where we are on timing, if you want to move, but I'm here, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Rama before we move to
Hi, Rama, I'm Suchi. I was wondering what is the extent of assessing the IP by the company which is investing, or by someone like you?
Yes,
Or
I'm gonna
the
tell that
one
to
who's
Madhuri right
required.
away.
I'm actually gonna,
Yeah, sure.
no, I'm gonna address it, but I think as a general matter, it's gonna be dependent on the transaction, right? If it's a transaction where
you might need to use this for online
Ah,
first.
okay.
But just you can use it for now.
the question from Suchi in the room was, what is the extent of how IP is evaluated in the transaction? Yeah, so the answer is it depends, right? If the licensing or the acquisition transaction is happening despite IP because they want the team or they want some access to some some aspect of it, it may not drive, right? But in most transactions in the life sciences space or in deep tech space where you don't have a product and you're not going to have a product and commercialization for any time, IP is all you have. And so what is assessed is, are they signing up for a problem? are they signing up for an ownership problem or a fight with another company or an infringement problem? How long is your IP going to be alive for? How much exclusivity can they get? And I'm going to talk about each one of these. So it's pretty important if you're in the therapeutic space, if you're in the medical device space, because a buyer or licensor, licensee doesn't want to sign up for a problem. Sometimes there are problems and the economics are just factored in. Economics are produced. They understand that they're signing up for certain issues. There are, we call it in the US, hair on the deal, right? There's hair and they know, but they are sophisticated enough that they can put a price tag to it, or they can, what might have brought a small company down and killed the company, a larger company can just deal with it, but there's a price tag.
Can I just take one last question?
Yeah, of course.
There's one online from Anand Kogu, which says, wants to understand the impact of AI on diligence. Are there AI tools to assist in diligence, preparation, identification of gaps, and so on?
That's a good question. I'm sure there are. I mean, I know, right? So, for example, one of the ways, we use AI within the law firm is and it may or may not be an issue for you, right? But in instances, right, for example, where a company has like a lot of contracts, there are AI tools that will go through, summarize the contracts, help identify whether there are particular provisions that an acquirer will be interested in. So there are a number of diligence AI tools that are actually available in the market right now that acquirers are definitely using in connection with deals, and that you could probably use to help streamline your process. The question is, I think, depending on how, if you're not a very complex company and you don't have hundreds of contracts, is it going to be worth the money? That I don't know.
And you need to worry about confidentiality too. So you can't use the public tools, right?
Correct, not a public tool, right? There are some that, right, preserve confidentiality, but yes, those are probably more expensive then. And also know, right, again, back to sort of what the acquirer is concerned about. Many acquirers have their own internal stipulations in terms of usage of AI. And so although it might sound very attractive at the moment, again, right, I mean, the way AI currently works, as you said, right, you don't know how your information is going to be used and pulled into the AI universe. And so definitely be careful. We have some products at work that all of us don't get to use it, or because some sort of people get to use it because it is actually fairly expensive.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you very much. I think I'll request you to take a seat here, and maybe Madhuri can take the floor, right? We can talk about IP now next. Who's getting you some? Yeah. You want to use it?
Yeah.
Just watch the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you all for your time. So what the things Rama spoke about, so I'm Madhuri Roy, I'm a partner in our IP strategy and counseling team. And we very much start at the top of, if you think of it as a funnel, we start with folks such as yourself, founders, startups, and we grow with you to when you get to the point where all the things that Rama talked about in a transaction context. And so the earlier we can get in and become as a sort of a part of your team from the external side, we can guide you along the way. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is really just why and how to prepare for diligence. So this talk is not about, this is a patent, this is how you to prosecute, these are the standards. I'm happy, I can talk about that kind of stuff all day long as well, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask them, and I have other slides I can share on that, but this is really in the context of how to prepare for diligence, the kind of things we see in diligence. The bread and butter of my practice is working with startups and preparing them for whatever exit it is for them, whether it's a partnership transaction, going to market, or an acquisition. So just a couple of, why is IP important, right? It is in the complex science and technology spaces such as life sciences, devices, deep tech, clean tech, right? You're building bespoke things, processes, compositions, devices, materials. And so it enhances the company's value. It really gives you a valuation, because in the therapeutics, for example, to go from bench to bedside, it's easily a decade, right? And all you have for a significant period of time, especially in the beginning, is IP. That's what protects your place in line in the marketplace. And it facilitates strategic partnering, some of the things Nama talked about, and that's what I'm going to focus on in the diligence context, but it also facilitates getting noticed. I think, Dr. Premnath, your question is, how do you get noticed, right? Publications, IP, it shows this level of sophistication. And it also deters competitors, because at the end of the day, IP is the fence you build on your property. You have a core dwelling, a core structure, your inventive contributions to the field, and then you have a fence around your property. And the space you can build from your core dwelling to the fence, that's your property. You want to make sure that you have all the legal rights to it. And at the end of the day, IP isn't, well, I filed a patent, so I can do this. It's to keep other people out. It's to require people to get a license from you to practice your technology and space around your technology, or to just keep them out. And so that the earlier you can think about that as the role of IP in your company and in your endeavors, I think the more holistic you can think about it. And what I will say is, IP doesn't give you the right to practice, it just gives you the right to exclude. And that, governments in general around the world do not like monopolies, but this is one monopoly that they will give you in exchange for you to build innovation, to promote innovation, and you teach the public how to make and use your invention, and for that they'll give you 20 years to allow people to keep people out. So it is one of the government granted monopolies. So look, investors, acquirers, underwriters, wherever you are, care about IP. A lot of what Rama talked about is much more once you have proven your value and have products, but it all starts at the top. It's not like, oh, we're going to get acquired, now let's pay attention to our IP. It is like cleaning your house, right? It has to be done consistently to have a good shiny product at the end. So early investors, they're looking for the basics. What are they investing in? What concepts? And there can be significant variation in expectations depending on if they're a general investor, if they are a strategic investor. And then mid-stage, later investors and acquirers really want to see an IP protection strategy that's aligned with the business plan. The business can't be talking on one side of the mouth and the IP saying something else. And so again, that's not something you just fix up before a transaction, and it's something as your business is developing, growing, changing, your IP needs to be doing that. So it's dynamic. And then of course, if you're not going the acquisition or partnering route and you are going all out and list on the stock exchange and things like that, there is IP due diligence that's performed by underwriters, and that is then governed by security laws. I will say the IP scrutiny in complex technologies such as life sciences, deep tech, and the like, early investors and this mid-stage investors, it's much more high levels of scrutiny around IP due diligence, whereas when it comes to sort of underwriters and listing on stock exchanges and capital markets, the IP, yes, it is important, but it's really one of disclosure. If you have an IP issue, if you have some ongoing litigation, disclose it in the public documents so that whoever's choosing to buy stock in your company can make their decision accordingly. Whereas if there's an IP problem at the sort of the first Series A or a licensing transaction, it can shut the whole transaction down. So IP due diligence, right? Just basics, right? What is due diligence? It's really an investigation into the accuracy of the information that you are providing a potential investor or acquirer. And companies say stuff. We have a strong IP position. We have no FTO issues. We have no patent problems. We have a patent, therefore we have no problems. And it's really examining the veracity of those statements in an analytical, technical, legal way. And why is it done, right? We just talked about that, to assess overall IP risk. And then significant issues may lead to either a failed transaction, and to your question, right, just a change in valuation just becomes one more factor that's a liability, right? So and what one acquirer that's very sophisticated may just put a price tag on an issue, another maybe earlier stage transactor may say, oh, we can't sign up for this problem. So it's what the appetite of who's on the other side of the table. When's it done, right? Financings, partnering deals, M&A, maybe just a monetization royalty stream, and then underwriting of public offerings. And Rama talked a little bit about sort of the basics of diligence process in general, and IP is usually in the kind of deals we do, IP is important and IP is focused on. So how long does it take, right? It really depends on the scope and who's been hired and how much they're being asked to look at. You may have a product stack of, say, 3 products, but the partner that is interested and is courting you may be only interested in one of the products, and the other 2 pipeline, maybe they're not interested in it all, or they're not giving value to it, and so they will tell their attorneys, focus on product number 1, and then but you have to be ready, right? And maybe another partner may be interested in product number 2. So again, scope is usually determined by the partner on the other side. Of course, if you eventually are in a situation where you are the one you are on the buy side or the licensing side, it's a flipping of the script, but I'm making an assumption, at least for many of you, that you are on the offering services side, the sell side. How long can it take? It really depends, 2 weeks to a month. It depends on how much is being evaluated. The more prepared you are, the quicker it can go. And so what are they looking for, right? So they're looking, I would say, if you think of IP as a 3-legged table, I mean, I visualize it this way, but I think it's very practical. One is your patent portfolio, and we'll call that your patent exclusivity. Like, how good is it? How long is it going to last? Does it protect your products? Does it protect what you're doing today, what you say you're going to do in the future? Does it potentially even cover competitors, so it has an offensive and defensive quality? Is there sufficient layers of protection, right? Narrow, broad, medium, right? All of that. So that's one leg of the stool. The second leg of the stool is, okay, you have your own IP. Remember, that's your fence. The next piece is freedom to operate, right? Your own IP doesn't give you the right to operate. Freedom to operate is, would you be infringing somebody else's patent? And no acquirer or partner necessarily wants to sign up for a lawsuit. And so that's the second leg of the stool that's evaluated in the transaction. And then the third one is really ownership and inventorship. So you have a portfolio. Do you really own it? Is your license in good order? Are you, is there a disgruntled inventor who hasn't assigned their rights and is actually going to walk away with half the IP? If you think about, for those of you in the biotech space, in the Cas9 University of California IP, the foundational Cas9 patents actually are co-owned between University of California and Emmanuelle Charpentier, who didn't assign her rights to UC. And so now that has created a very interesting ability of who's licensed to whom. One entity has Emmanuelle Charpentier has formed their own entity of ERS Genomics, and one has licensed to Editas, the other has licensed to CRISPR Therapeutics, and that's because of a lack of assignment. UC was not able to get all the IP under their house. So anyway, that's the third leg, right? You own everything you say you own. Is it all papered up? Sometimes it's a check the box exercise, literally is a check the box. Sometimes it's complex. Sometimes there's misappropriation detected in that. Like one of your key scientists who's working on the technology has come from a big company and brought with them information and used it in your product that they shouldn't have. Even though it was them who did that, not that you told them to do it, but now your product or your service is potentially contaminated. And these are the kind of things when we do diligence all the time on behalf of investors, and we ask, we'll even look at LinkedIn, right? We'll look at who are the inventors on this patent, where were they before that? And we just add those, we saw they were at, Pfizer, and they were working on a very similar program at Pfizer. What safeguards did you take to make sure there was no trade secret misappropriation and the like? So the first leg of the stool, right? The strength of your patent portfolio. For your issued patents and pending applications, do they cover the key aspects? Are they valid? Like, is it too broad? Is it too narrow? Too narrow is not a problem with validity, but is it too broad? Is it subject to being knocked down eventually if you're making it in the marketplace? A third party is going to have eyes on you and may try to knock your patent down. What about the comments made during prosecution? And this is why it's really important to choose, work with a team that understands that everything you say in prosecution can be held against you in litigation. So the less said, the better. Examiner interviews are often useful because you can transact off the record. When we do diligence, if the seller will say, oh, we have a granted patent, in the US, right? So we look at the file history, it's all publicly available. We say who said what affidavits were provided, was all relevant prior art cited. All of those goes to the heart of the validity. How much protection is provided temporally, right? Temporally, when is it expiring? If your patent's expiring in 2035 and your plan to get to market is 2033, that's not a lot of headroom in terms of exclusivity, right? How long you can keep people out of the marketplace. So really then, what do you have additional patent families? Maybe again, in the therapeutic space, your foundational family covers your method of treatment, your composition of matter and your method of treatment. Maybe then you file additional cases, second, third families to particular clinical use cases, formulations, patient populations, things like that. Also, how much protection is provided geographically, right? Did you file just in one or two jurisdictions? As I say this, I also am very empathetic that IP is so important early on and it's very expensive. And there's this tension at the beginning to do it all right, but to not spend a lot of money. It's an existential tension, and I think that the most efficient you can be with understanding and defining your invention and conveying that to, you have an IP team here, they're very experienced, packaging up for what is your solution, this is what our competitors are doing, this is why we're better, this is who's close to us. You know, you can be efficient, but I'm empathetic and I don't have a solution to that tension. And thinking about your IP and its strength, right? Okay, so especially if you have a process or it's an algorithm or it's something that's not something that you've built, like a molecule or a device or a chip, right? You have a nice patent, it has a lot of steps, but again, a patent is to exclude others. So when I'm evaluating and doing diligence, I'll say, okay, sure, they have a patent, but can they use it? Can they actually detect enforcement? Is this process describing what's happening inside the four walls of a third party that we're never going to get access to? So sometimes you have to value the strength of the portfolio in terms of what is its street value, right? Is it just optics? Oh, they have two patents, they're sophisticated, versus this is currency we can use to demand that we get a license from a third party or something like that. Can we monetize it? And then granted, other questions is the family close? I hear this a lot, and I think this comes back to the tension vis-a-vis cost. We got our composition of matter patent, we're good, right? I would say, and I know it's expensive, but for patent families that cover your key products, try to keep the family open in key jurisdictions. It's not possible in all jurisdictions. In jurisdictions like US, it is possible. In EP, you can keep them open. I would say, putting aside how expensive things are in the US, keeping families open is pretty cheap in the US compared to Europe and some other countries, because you don't have to pay annuities, and the reason for we like to see families open is that if I'm an acquirer and there's a later litigation, if a family's open, you can go back and get more IP if your foundational IP is challenged.
Can you explain that a little bit in terms of what you mean by family being open? Because there might be, you're probably referring to additional claims and so on and so forth that you'd like to add, but I think that language might not be familiar to me.
Yeah, of course, and sorry about that. So you file we'll just start with one life cycle of a family. So you file a provisional application, in a year you convert it to a complete PCT application, and then 18 months later you take that PCT application and you enter it around the world in national phase. And so now that's a family. It all claims priority back to the original provisional application. That's how you define a family. So now you've entered national phase, maybe India, US, Europe, China. Let's just keep it simple. You then prosecute in each of those jurisdictions according to their timelines. Different patent offices have different timelines. You negotiate some, let's just take US, for example. You negotiate some subject matter that protects your composition, like the exact composition, the exact sequence, the exact structure. You get a granted patent, you pay the issue fee, and you're happy. I have a patent, it covers my product, and if you do not file a continuing application prior to its grant in the US, prosecution is closed for the family in the US. You may have it open in China and India and Europe still, but in the US, if you do not file a child application, the family is closed. So I would recommend filing a continuing application. There are cheaper ways to do it. At the end, these are government fees, they have to be paid, but you can file a continuing application even without having an exact strategy of what you want to get in it just at that moment, but it's a one or done. If you do not file it, you cannot file it later unless you can prove to the patent office that your missing the date to file it was unavoidable, and you'd have to petition. But let's assume that's not the case, right? It's just that you're like, I got what I need. I don't want to spend another, X thousand of dollars to keep this family open. But where it's important is maybe you have other inventions in the four corners of your disclosure that you that could maybe cover a competitor, or maybe you make changes and slight variations to your product over time, and it turns out 5 years later the claims for which you got in the granted patent don't actually cover your product anymore. So it allows for product variation. So I hope that's clear, and I think it's strategic and allows for you to keep mining your specification to cover.
There's just one increase.
So you have mentioned that is it easy to prove infringement? So how do you do that?
Close.
So do you actually do the infringement analysis, claim mapping? How do you do that?
Yeah, so say there is a claim that says a method of discovering a binding site on I'm just using a biotech example, but say the claim that is granted that says a method of discovering the binding site for a molecule on a target comprising, sequencing the target, doing this binding assay, measuring this, and then determining whether this on the output. And that claim is like a discovery claim, right? It's not your product. It's a discovery process by which you may have found your target or your lead or something like that. So say you get a claim on that, right? Okay, it tells the world that you have this technology, you built this novel and inventive way to do target selection or binding site mapping or something, right? But how do you know that some other third party is actually performing these 5 steps in the 4 walls of their facility for which you have no access, unless they're publishing it or telling the world in their patent or paper or poster that they're doing this? So what is the value of that claim if it's really difficult to detect infringement? Infringement analysis is different. That's like, this is my claim, this is the competitor's product, does it meet every limitation of the claim, or vice versa? This is my product, this is the third party patent, am I performing or mapping to every single? That's an infringement analysis. Detection of infringement is how strong is your IP? Can infringement be detected? So that's where also, and we're not, maybe I have a slide to it, is like having these conversations early on about, this is what we're going to patent, this is what we're going to hold as proprietary information and trade secret, because maybe we don't have to spend a lot of money to try to patent this process of like protein binding site mapping, because that's not how we're going to make money, right? If your company is about offering a platform service to partners to find protein binding sites, then you probably should patent it, right? Because that is how you're going to make money. But if your plan is to use that technology, find a binding site, then do screening, and then find a molecule, and then make a therapeutic, this is a back-end process, and maybe you don't have to tell the world about it.
There's another question from an online participant, Vipin Deshpande. He's asking, by child patent, do you mean a patent of addition?
So a patent of addition is a very Indian specific regime that is not there in most other parts of the world. By a kind of child application, I mean a divisional. So it shares the same specification, and before it grants, you file a divisional. The rest of the world calls it divisional. Of course, in the US, they have to do it different, and there's 2 flavors, there's continuations and divisionals. When I say a child patent, it means both of those things. Rest of the world, India included, they just call it divisional applications. You file a application that claims priority to the just grant, just about to grant application, which claims priority to the PCT, which claims priority to the provisional, and your team here at Venture Center can sort of walk you through that.
Thank you.
There's a question here.
Sure.
Hello, ma'am. So, does the exposure matter? The exposure varies in case of if it is a process patent or if it is a product patent. In case of family patent. So, for example, there is scientific pad capsule I make. So there is process A, process B, by which I can now I have IP on the product, irrespective of I use either of those. Does the exposure vary in that case?
So if you have a product by which it can be made by multiple processes, right? It's important you get the product claim, and it sounds like you've secured that or you're working on it, right? So if you have a product and a competitor, remember, it's to exclude others, right? So if a competitor, regardless of what process they use, maybe it's process C, maybe it's process N, right? If they make the product that you have defined, they are infringing your composition patent. And so for that reason, you'll hear like composition is supreme, right? Composition is king, composition, like in composition cases, right? Processes of how to make are valuable, right? Because if you can patent what we call like choke points, like regardless of the process you do, whether it's A or B or Z, right? If you have to pass through some intermediate choke point, some structure, some conditions, some intermediate, even intermediate like composition that's complex to something else or something like that, and you patent that, and you can patent a choke point in your process, then your process claim can also be valuable. You probably, unless you're planning on keeping process A and B as a trade secret, if it's already in your applications, you probably should pursue those process claims because you're at least keeping other people out from claiming those, from using those processes. The other thing I would say is if you think your process, even though it may seem like narrow, you have to do this and you do that, it may be a lot of steps, and somebody may just optically look at it and be like, oh, so many steps, it must be easy to design that. If you know that this, after all of the empirical work you've done, that any variations to this product, if per process, is going to produce a inferior product, then your process is pretty good. Like it's actually may look like it's really detailed, but it's pretty good. And that's something you as you when talking to an investor, an acquirer or a partner, you have to explain that because at the end of the day, we lawyers are given some set amount to do an analysis, and I'll look at a patent and it has steps A through F, and I'm like, it looks narrow. Like the onus is on you to say, well, look, any small variations on this will create it. It is a key process. So it can vary. Again, I think like it depends on the situation. And then I will also say there are these product by process claims, which is maybe too technical for this talk, but you claim a product by which the process is made, and then that's a different layer of protection. But one more thing. Method patents, like a method of using a product to treat a disease or to purify something, those are valuable. And I think like people who are maybe not coming from the life sciences space or sort of old school will say, oh, but there's no value to methodology patents. And that's entirely not true in the therapeutic space. A method of treating a subject, which by the way, in India, you cannot get, and that's a big issue. And I know that there's hope that there'll be statutory changes, but I understand that there's no change in sight right now. Maybe you know better on that topic, but almost everywhere else in the world, except India, and some South American countries, you can get some type of method of use claim or a use claim or a Swiss type use claim for manufacture of a product, and those are valuable claims in the therapeutic space.
Actually, my question was from that side only because I have come across patent applications which mention the product as well as the process, and if we were thinking so we have some product portfolio that is similar to other portfolio, but in order to prove the non-obviousness or novelty, is it recommended to add the process as well, or is that not recommended? How would you?
When you say the process, you mean process of making or
Yes.
method of use?
Process of making, manufacture.
I mean, I think you have to enable, if you're pursuing compositions in your disclosure, you have to enable how to make and use it, right? You can't just say, here's a composition, right? You have to describe, the reason you're getting the monopoly from the government is you're teaching the world how to make and use the invention, right? So you can't just provide the composition without a process, but you don't have to provide every single process, you just have to provide the best process or currently a process.
It probably is also referring to sometimes comments you receive from the examiner. Suppose your product claim is not getting approved, people might convert it into a product by process claim, right? To overcome some of those limitations. So, but anyway, that's can be discussed later. So,
Yeah, I'm happy to chat offline. A product by process is usually when you're making a product that already exists, but you have a new process of making it. That's a prime use of a product by process case, because you're trying to claim the product by which by the way it's made. But if you have a new product and a new process for making it, those should be able to stand on their own 2 feet, but obviously it depends on the situation. And I know we're at time, but let me just maybe make a few comments on your patent portfolio. You know, this leg of the stool that we said, how good is your portfolio? Do you have both offensive and defensive capability? Defensive means you can exclude others from practicing your technology. Offensive means you're mining your specification to write claims that actually exclude others from practicing their technology. And that sounds obnoxious, but it's not, because it blocks competition and it can actually complement the portfolio of a potential partner or acquirer. So this is where, back to these child applications, these continuing applications, you get your first case, maybe it has a defensive quality to it, then you file a continuing application, and maybe it has an offensive quality to it. So you're really diversifying your portfolio in that manner. You'll get the slides. This is just sort of a exemplary timeline of the different. These are different families, but this is how you extend your exclusivity. Just an example, in a small molecule case, you have broad genus case, then you find your lead, you have a lead species, then maybe method of use, maybe processes, salts and polymorphs, formulations, and then you start getting into clinical studies, you start filing on dosing regimens, and then you start learning more as you get into phase 2 and phase 3. Maybe there's patient selection, populations, changes in dosing, combinations, commercial manufacturing pieces. Some of this you may, commercial manufacturing you may want to keep as a trade secret, but this is sort of an outline of when I talk about the third leg of the stool, about like how good is your portfolio. It's not just we have a patent to our product, we're good, right? So this easily can get you, if you file today, 2026, a provisional, it will expire in 2047. So your broad genus patent, if you file today, it will expire 2047. Your, this rightmost combination might actually expire in 2055, right? Because this timeline for a molecule is easily 5 to 10 years. Ownership, Rama talked about it a little bit, and we talked a little bit on earlier if there's problems, we talked about the CRISPR issue. Does the company own all the IP? When we do diligence, we review all of the assignments, the license. Do they own all IP, or do they have rights to all of the IP via a license? So we look at all the assignments, we look at the license, we confirm things have been properly executed, recorded. We look at university relationships, my comment on looking at inventors and LinkedIn. We look at consultants. If you eventually grow to start hiring consultants, make sure that their obligation to assign to you isn't conflicted by their obligation to assign to someone else. Like, that's always a tension, right? You get somebody from a big pharma to consult. If they're working on the they've probably signed something with the big pharma that everything they work on belongs to the pharma. So you want to make sure you're not inadvertently creating co-ownership of your IP in some way. We talked about making sure licenses are good standard, use of AI platforms, making sure, you know, how broad is your coverage, your territory, any inventorship issues. There's a difference between authorship and inventorship. I will leave this slide with you, but rest to say it's not the same. And for most of, you know, first-time founders coming from the university setting, I think, you know, work with your team here at Venture Center who's advising you on IP to really tease out the difference. We talked about freedom to operate, which is, again, by commercializing your product, are you walking into a lawsuit? And this is what partners, acquirers, investors are looking at. Are they signing up for a lawsuit? If you are transacting with a mature pharma, kind of the partners that Rama was talking about, they'll probably just put a price tag on it, right? Because they have the arsenal to fight it. If you are doing some type of deal with someone on the of equal stature to complement each other, they may not want to sign up for it. So I would say doing some amount of freedom to operate analysis at the appropriate time is warranted. There are different levels of scope and cost you can do it, and you work with counsel. How to prepare in general, right? The more savvy and prepared you are, the better you're received. Have a clean IP positions, be able to substantiate those statements I made in the beginning, right? Like we have a patent, we have no problems, we have FTO, right? Be able to like substantiate that, get diligence done quickly, be responsive, be proactive, be cooperative, and pick a team amongst yourself. Everyone has their strengths. Who will answer the business questions, who will answer the technical questions, maybe have your legal counsel answer some of the legal questions because they've probably been through that before. We have checklists that you can look at to prepare, and just tips on working efficiently, effectively with a law firm, with people like Rama and me and our teams, right? On the IP side, like more IP isn't necessarily better, right? You just need quality IP. Find counsel really that understands your business and will counsel on strategy and will really be your partner. At the end of the day, we have the best relationships when we are a partner and not just a one-time transactional thing. And then understanding about how to build a portfolio. It's dynamic. And a couple of do's and don'ts, right? I think just leave you with these, right? When you're building a portfolio, think about your results and how they impact what you think is your invention. Keep notebooks, countersigned. I understand most of these days are electronic, but make sure that you can substantiate inventorship. Have your folks assign the documents. Have it all checked out. Certain jurisdictions, U.S. included, require you to submit references that are material to patentability in what's called an information disclosure statement. So do keep a folder of known references. That comes up in litigation all the time. Discuss with your IP counsel if you've done freedom to operate and what you found. Understand what your IP says and doesn't say, and make sure you're not out there presenting before you file. More of the same. And don'ts. This is not so much about diligence, but about making sure your IP is clean before you ever get into diligence, so you don't have problems. Don't publicly disclose without pre-authorization from whoever is advising you or file. Don't assume you can speak to former colleagues in the university about your experiments, even if they are your friend or really smart, because you want to make sure you have consulting relationships and collaborative agreements. So again, that the IP all rests with you.
Don't use personal emails and devices for work. If I know when you're startup and you're nimble and you're moving fast, try to make sure that what isn't the company is the company. AI, we talked about already, use closed AI platforms. Don't use open source software without approval because there are usually these licenses that attach, and make sure that you aren't dedicating then you're building on a open source software that you have to then dedicate it to the parent software. Be open with your counsel so that they can be open with the patent office. And Rama talked about getting to a term sheet or confidentiality. They're, the bigger the buyer, the more they're going to ask for stuff, and I think you have to work with counsel about what confidential information you can share with them, especially if you know a prospective partner or buyer is looking at a lot of companies that are in your space. You may want to hold back things until you are, make sure it's not a fishing expedition, and in extreme cases, it's not all the time, but in extreme cases, if we know that a buyer is looking at companies that are building very things, we may ask for like a clean team or a lawyers only diligence, which is like, hey, we'll give you the structures, your lawyer the structures, but big pharma don't get access to the structures, and that often requires its own agreement. So I will stop there. This is
questions
Wendy.
online.
Yeah, we have a few
Sure.
questions online.
Then we'll close quickly after.
Yeah,
No,
it's
I'm no problem.
It's just two questions. The
Yeah.
first question is from again Vipin Deshpande. He's saying that in India, divisional application is splitting a broad application into two or more separate applications. But a patent of addition could come later after the first patent is granted. Does this mean that the US patent of addition is not permitted?
So US doesn't have a patent of addition. We have what's called CIPs, continuations in part. I would actually refer to your local counsel about advising on when a patent of addition should be used. I don't have experience in that. I think I'll leave my comment at that. I'm not equipped to answer that question.
Archana can address it separately later with you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
There's another scenario-based question that says that if XYZ company working in pharmaceutical or medical devices wanted to explore possibility of market capture in CN, JP or KR with limited funds, what could be IP strategy trademark filing first? Followed utility models, and do you have any suggestions with respect to regulatory playing role in IP strategy by prioritizing either of jurisdiction in JP, KR or CN?
So I think filing IP usually comes well early, time-wise, much earlier than thinking about regulatory strategies. I think you have a 30-month window from when you file your first provisional to when you have to enter national phases. And if you know your product or your process or whatever it is that your invention is going to be particularly well suited for some countries in this situation, Japan, Korea, China, but whatever, you have to make decisions as to where to enter. So you have to enter national phases in those countries. With respect to the interplay between IP and regulatory, the one we see, and I don't think this answers the question, but the one where the interplay is there is that you can get, not in all countries, but it's growing the number of countries. India is one, US is one. China is now recently, I don't know about India, if India has PTE, patent term extension, but it doesn't, right? Yeah, I didn't think so. China just announced theirs like a year and a half ago. You can get extra patent term on one selected patent that covers your product or process to compensate for regulatory delays. So say you get a patent granted in 2026, but you don't get approval for your product till 2030. There's an equation, but you might be able to get 4 more years of patent life on your patent to extend your patent's exclusivity. So that's the biggest sort of regulatory patent play we see. I don't know if I answered all the questions there, but I'm happy to take it offline. And I would recommend eventually getting information from local counsel around the specific jurisdictions.
Any other questions on that?
No, we don't have any more
Okay.
questions. For the online participants, I've pasted the feedback link in the chat box. I request you all to kindly fill the feedback form.
And perhaps you can just, you have provided these email addresses here, it can be shared online, right?
Yeah, sure, and we
Can you,
we
put
can
this online?
forward that. And if I can just make sort of one shameless plug for our platform, right? We're a global general practice law firm. We, Rama mentioned this at the beginning of our talk. We have this Cooley Go platform. You don't have to be a client. You just get online and you can look at checklists and articles about many of the things we talked about, diligence preparation, ownership, consultants, and you have a document generator, obviously read it, customize it, but this is available to you and it's a service that we offer. And on the IP and transactional side, we have lawyers and professionals who are deeply embedded in technology in our patent group. We put this list together, there's at least a MS or a PhD in all of these subjects. So even though my focus is life sciences, Rama sort of splits her time between life sciences and other technologies. So all my examples were small molecules, CRISPR and protein binding sites, but we have colleagues who can think about other things as well.
Well, thank you very much. I think let's give her a round of applause and also to Rama. I think since we're out of time, we will close. But as Neetali mentioned, online folks, please provide your feedback before you leave, right?
Yes.
We can
Just
close after that.
And for offline participants, it's there, the QR.
I'll just take a minute to, we have something to give you. First of all, thank you very much to both of you for taking the time out and coming here. We just wanted to thank you for that and also give you something which will hopefully help you remember us. Can I go with you first? So we usually have a book here, which is some stories from our startups out here. But we also have something which is made by one of our startups, which is some of our startups have B2C products. So this is one of them. Hopefully you'll enjoy it as well and use it. It's very practical and useful. No mementos. I think the book you have here, Rama, is slightly different. I think she has probably received this one
Yeah,
before.
I did.
so-
Yeah.
so- Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have you closed, Vidali?
No, not.
Thank you. So this is 15 stories of our entrepreneurs. That one is done by, this is impact, these are social enterprises from the venture sector. Very interestingly, it is written by both these people are teenagers.
Okay.
Or just graduating. Yeah.
Design, she was telling